Propellerhead Reason has something truly beautiful and unique that no other DAW has. A feature that brings the visual and hands-on feel to music production. A command center for making music, doing sound design, and all kinds of creative adventures. And it's called the Rack. So let's go through the magnificent Rack in Reason. This video is part of my quick tutorial series on Propellerhead Reason. Alright, so here we have the Rack in Reason. And this is actually from my own master template in Reason 9.5. First, you should learn what a rack is, because what you see here is actually what big studios have always had as hardware units mounted into rack spaces. That's why you see these holes in the end of the rack spaces. In real life, those are actually meant to mount the hardware units with using rack mounting screws. So Reason actually mimics the professional studio hardware setup by having this rack where you have all your devices in. The rack is not just for show, it is super practical and even more useful in my opinion than a real hardware studio, because it is much faster to work in a virtual studio rack space. To the very left, you always start with rack space number 1. Here you will always have the hardware interface unit and the master section at the top. Those are the only devices that you cannot move. All the other devices can be easily moved inside its own rack space and even to another rack. You can place your devices in any rack you want. I have a lot of racks because I like to structure my devices into different sections, like the drums here, the accents here, the bass sounds here, and so on. Every instrument, effect or device you add to your project will be included here in one of these rack spaces. It doesn't matter if you add it right from here, from your sequencer, or from your mixer. So now I am in the sequencer and I have opened up the browser. If I add a new instrument into the sequencer, it will be automatically added in the rack. So now I am back in the rack, and if I go to the right here, it was added automatically at the final rack space right here. For instruments, this goes both ways. So you can add an instrument right here in the rack. Let's go with a Kong drum designer. And if I now go back to the sequencer, it is added as a track here. You will also find every instrument in the mixer. So if you remember this name, Kong Kit, and we go to the mixer, it is right here. So it is in the mixer, in the rack space, and in the sequencer. They are all connected and the same device. So remember this, all instrument tracks as well as audio tracks will be present in all 3 main elements of Reason: the sequencer, the rack, and the mixer. So that's only true for instrument tracks and audio tracks. If you create, for example, an effect, like this, let's go with a bass amp, you don't really play a bass amp as an instrument, so it will not show up in the mixer or the sequencer, just in your rack space, because you use it as an effect for an instrument or audio track. So, what type of devices can you add to your Reason rack? Well, there's quite a few actually. If I right-click anywhere in an empty space in the rack with my mouse, I get a menu with the devices I can add to the rack. First, you can create audio tracks, which we did earlier, to record vocals, guitar, and so on with. You can create a mix channel, which I have done over here. And you can use a mix channel for feeding audio from any device, so you can mix it in the big mixing console in Reason. Then, of course, you can create instruments like the Kong drum designer, and effects like the bass amp I added earlier. Then you can also add special send effects, which will be routed into the mixing console so that you can feed audio from any individual track into the specific send effect. Here we have a list of all the instruments you can add, all the effects, and also special utility devices like the combinator, for example. And finally, the players, which are basically MIDI effects to control your performance with. So, the basic layout of the rack in Reason is that you can add any device that you want to any of these rack spaces. You can add them vertically or move them horizontally like I have done here. And you can drag devices in between racks like this, and also in the same rack like this. What you don't see is what is going on in the background as you move devices, create new devices, and so on. What if you could flip the rack and look at the backside? Well, in Reason you can. If you use your tab button on your computer keyboard, you will flip the rack and see the backside like this. I just wanted to show you the backside of the rack so that you can actually see how it is all connected with cables between devices. This is again like a real professional hardware studio rack, but much more easy to organize. And feel free to go to the back of the rack to analyze how it is all connected. Experiment as much as you want, but you should know that you can produce all the music you want without ever having to go to the back of the rack, because all cables and connections are made automatically for you when you add devices, effects, and so on. Alright, now you have learned the fundamentals of the rack in Reason and how you can use it for your own music productions. Now it's time for you to take action. Go into the rack, create new devices, drag them around, switch to the backside of the rack and look at how everything is connected. Experiment with the cables yourself when you feel ready. My name is Mike, guiding you to use the rack in Reason, because you rock, my friends. My name is Mike, and I share my story and journey as a music composer and sound designer to inspire creative people like you. So click that subscribe button to gain music superpowers.